Well, good afternoon. 4 years ago, Illinoisans were grappling with a state budget crisis that crippled our schools, our human services, our universities, our confidence about our ability to work together for the common good. Our working families, our seniors, our students, our most vulnerable residents paid the price for it. And over the course of the prior administration, our state suffered 8 credit downgrades, forcing the state to pay more to do less. Unfortunately, Illinois became an example for the nation of what happens when government and budgets are mismanaged. 4 years later, amidst the pain and loss caused by a deadly global pandemic, Illinois has become instead an example for the nation of how resilient our people are, not only in helping our families and our neighbors persist through a financial crisis and a health crisis, but also in managing through the state's fiscal challenges. I came into this office 2 sessions ago with a promise to always meet our most basic responsibility, a real balanced budget. For the 3rd straight year, I'll sign into law another balanced budget for Illinois that demonstrates fiscal responsibility works with a progressive vision of governance. Today, ours is a budget that addresses the historical structural deficit and makes responsible choices, paying off debt early, nearly eliminating our backlog of bills, and making critical investments to stimulate economic growth, jobs, and opportunity for our people, all while keeping our operating budget flat aside from education and critical human services. And for the 3rd year in a row, we're making our full pension payment. Not only that, this budget also ensures the entire $3.2 billion borrowed from the Fed in the bleakest moments of the pandemic will be paid in full, more than a full calendar year ahead of its due date. Doing that saves taxpayers tens of millions of dollars in interest payments. I want to pause on that for a moment because all of these achievements collectively mark a significant turning point for our state. Republicans like to badmouth the state, and yet they're the ones who wanted to irresponsibly spend one-time American Rescue Plan dollars to paper over our structural deficit. In contrast, we Democrats are investing in priorities that will grow and revitalize our economy, improving our fiscal outlook dramatically, and reducing tax expenditures on the wealthiest corporations. It's the Democrats that are getting the state's fiscal house in order. That's the story of this budget. That's the story of Illinois in 2021. Fiscal discipline pays off. I've been in office for fewer than 900 days, and in that time, despite the greatest public health challenge in a generation, the bill backlog has been nearly eliminated, down to 30 days or less. We're paying our bills on time in Illinois and saving tens of millions of taxpayer dollars in interest. I want to thank my partners in the General Assembly for making this trajectory possible, especially Speaker Chris Welch and President Don Harmon, budget leaders Greg Harris and LG Sims and their respective teams. Together, we've worked to solve the problems of the past while managing the challenges of the present and keeping a sharp eye on the future. Thanks to the new leadership in the General Assembly, a willingness to put discipline over desire, the fierce advocacy of so many across our state fighting for a better Illinois, we are changing our story about Illinois. A commitment to a robust and inclusive future also guides our first investments of Illinois' $8.4 billion in federal relief dollars, which will fund initiatives and priorities over the next 3.5 years. Republicans want to use our one-time COVID relief funds to kick the budget can down the road and give favors to wealthy business interests. Instead, those dollars should be used to bring real relief to working families and spur economic recovery and safety in our communities. I'm very proud that my administration partnered with the General Assembly to craft a robust economic recovery package. That includes over $570 million for economic recovery for small businesses, entrepreneurs, and the most heavily impacted industries. Notably, $300 million more for our Back to Business grant program. Earlier in the pandemic, Illinois was one of the first and only states to get $540 million in relief to thousands of small businesses and childcare providers. And this new funding will expand the reach of the nation-leading business interruption grant program. We'll also bolster our pandemic response, mitigating COVID-19's impacts and strengthening our public health infrastructure for a safer future for all Illinoisans. And $1 billion will jumpstart critical projects in our plans to rebuild Illinois, hastening much-needed improvements like our Connect Illinois broadband plan and getting more jobs to more communities. Illinois is also doing more than ever before to stop the violence that ravages too many vulnerable communities, trauma that also deserves relief, just as much as economic pain relief. We're allocating more than $100 million for multi-pronged, comprehensive violence prevention and intervention efforts here in Illinois. My administration has worked with Senator Robert Peters and Representative Justin Slaughter, along with other members of the General Assembly, to shape the Reimagine Act to prevent gun violence. That includes creating a new Office of Firearm Violence Prevention, addressing trauma recovery from chronic exposure to gun violence for Illinois adults, and increasing funding for the COVID-19 Summer Youth Employment Program, which my administration launched last summer to deliver more opportunities to communities that are hurting. I'll be spending more time this summer talking about those investments and what they mean for our state, but I want to be clear to all of you. These are historic investments that have never been made before in Illinois, investments in real solutions, and they're critical steps in our efforts to tackle root causes of violence. Our state will also be increasing our help for housing, providing over $100 million for affordable housing and addressing homelessness, building on the $1.5 billion in rental relief that I recently announced to further our mission of providing assistance for affordable, stable housing for all Illinoisans. And I want to commend Senator Maddie Hunter and Representative Will Guzzardi. Sponsoring the Affordable Housing Omnibus was very hard work. They did a great job on it, and they're sending that to my desk. Together, we are elevating the impact of these programs to new heights. The General Assembly has also paved the way for Illinois to join the bipartisan coalition of states utilizing vaccine lotteries to encourage more residents to get vaccinated against COVID-19. The best thing that we can do, of course, to protect ourselves and our loved ones is to have as many people vaccinated as possible. So be on the lookout for further announcements on this front very soon. Also, and this is a personal favorite of mine, in Illinois, soon you'll be able to get a beer and a shot, or a shot and a shot, whatever suits your palate. I want to do a quick lightning round of all the progress that was made during this legislative session. I won't be able to mention everything, but I wanted to highlight a few things. On ethics, there are new guardrails to stop abuses like the revolving door and lobbying while working for government. It isn't perfect, and more work definitely remains, but there are more ways now to putting a stop to corruption than there ever have been before. On cannabis, I'm very proud of the work that Toy Hutchinson from my office did with Representative LaShawn Ford and Leader Kim Lightford to expand opportunities for people from vulnerable communities to get into this new industry, continuing our work to be the best and at the forefront of cannabis equity. On gun safety, Illinois State Police Director Brendan Kelly worked closely with advocates and lawmakers to streamline FOID card applications and expand incentives for background checks. On social justice, we're recognizing Juneteenth as a state holiday, but more importantly, as a time to celebrate emancipation. So before I take questions, I want to close by saying that this has been another landmark legislative session, and the people of Illinois are better for these efforts. I want to thank the members of the General Assembly for their work to bring so many vital efforts across the finish line. And with that, I'm happy to take questions from members of the media.
You said that without the income tax amendment, there would be pain. Now, you mentioned that a lot of areas in the budget are flat.
Yep.
Is that the pain, and how can you be so optimistic about the budget if there's that pain?
Well, let me be clear. Let me be clear about this. We worked very hard to try to adjust wherever we could spending to either flatten it, sometimes cut it. We had to do that mid-year in 2021. Some of that carries over into 2022. And then at the same time, we closed corporate loopholes, as you know, which is a permanent fix to the structural deficit, to a piece of the structural deficit. So those things work together strongly to help us. And then, of course, we had and appear to continue to have revenues that we did not expect as a result of the economic recovery that seems to be going much better than anybody had thought. I'm reviewing the maps. I have not reviewed, honestly have not reviewed the maps, so I'll continue to look at them and, I'll make a decision at that time.
How do you think the public's going to respond when they find out that the Senate President's chief of staff was lobbying for a big coal company this last year? Now he's going after coal while you're trying to pass a clean energy bill. I mean, is that ethical to your?
Look, I expect that all the people that I work with in government will be focused on doing the right thing for the people of Illinois. I expect that everybody that works in the General Assembly, everybody that works for the General Assembly will do that. I think integrity in government is extraordinarily important. Dan.
In terms of dollars, years, number of plants that are going to receive subsidies, how does that fit into the budget? And how does that live up to your promise to not have energy policy that's written by utilities?
Well, the utilities did not write the bill that we have worked on. That is clear. We have done everything that we can to stand up for clean energy principles, to make sure that we're expanding renewables in this state. I have set out my principles. I've stuck to those principles. And so, my hope is that we'll end up with a good energy bill. We were very close as of last night, and so I'm hopeful.
How much money and how many years and how many plants?
I'm sorry, you wanted to know?
How many years of subsidies, how big are they?
Well, at this point, I think that bill is now going to be with the General Assembly. They're working on it. We've obviously a lot of provisions in that got agreed upon, but then, there's still more work to be done. Still working on the bill.
So you and a lot of other Democrats have repeatedly said that you don't want energy negotiations to be held hostage by utilities.
Right.
So we had weeks of Exelon, from everyone in the room saying that Exelon is being expansive, and then finally you reach a deal, and then the municipal coal-fired power plants say, I'm sorry, never mind. So how is that not, being held hostage by those utilities?
Well, first of all, it was not the coal-fired plants that expressed themselves. There were members that did, and so, that's on them. I mean, I think. No, I'm just suggesting to you. I'm suggesting to you that it's a complex bill. Trust me when I tell you that the people who were in those working groups were not from the major utilities that I said would not be writing this bill. The people who are working closely with our office were people who believe in the principles that I set out. We put that bill forward. We worked very hard. You've got to bring to the table the people who own the nuclear power plants, ultimately. They didn't write any of it. But ultimately, they've got to be some part of the conversation because we want to keep those jobs. We want to keep those plants open. And that's been a firm principle of mine. I've said that from the beginning, while we're also working toward a clean energy future and methods for us to fight climate change in the state of Illinois.
What is the future of coal in Illinois? And are you considering extending your expiration date?
Well, again, we put forward, and the working groups put forward, it wasn't just us, that by 2035, coal plants would be closing. So that's what was in that bill. Mike, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
The budget puts a lot of money towards Democratic priorities. Members in both chambers brought that up. Why wasn't more money put towards the trust fund for unemployment? Obviously, it's going to be a big issue down the road.
Well, the dollars that were put forward for the state of Illinois from the American Rescue Plan, those have not been all entirely allocated. In fact, we have 3.5 years to allocate those. Some of it was, but some of it was not. We're looking at that. We have a lot of priorities that we want to cover. We also are hopeful that the federal government will be of some assistance. Many states have trouble in their UI trust fund because there were so many people who were unemployed over the course of the last 12, 14 months. So we'll continue to work on that, and of course, we work on that with business and labor at the table.
So I have two questions. First of all, in terms of the maps, you said you haven't decided on a particular position on whether to assign them, but what do you think of the overall process of maps being introduced one morning and then being voted on, then Republicans say they were railroaded through? What is your opinion?
Well, I wish that the Republicans had been willing to work with Democrats on this. They did not put their own map forward. They simply said, they crossed their arms and said they really didn't want anything to do with the process. We have a constitutional requirement in the state of Illinois to get maps done by June 30. They apparently unwilling to participate in that, and so you have the maps that were put forward. I have not reviewed those maps yet, but I will tell you that the Republicans should have put forward their own map. It would have been very helpful.
Is it not a fit deadline ultimately to have the maps approved by either the legislature or some kind of commission that's constitutionally spelled out? Why not go that route, wait for the census data to come out and get a truly fair map?
I think there will be census data that comes out, and I think there, may need to be some adjustments that get made as a result of that census data. This gentleman right here, I don't know your name, so I apologize. Derek, how are you?
Senator Republicans say that you are purposely preventing a confirmation hearing happening in the Senate for 4 appointees you made to the Prison Review Board. Why is a confirmation hearing not happening for 4 people that you appointed in 2019?
I can't answer that. That is something that the legislature is responsible for. Happy to have our members reviewed by that committee.
Governor, you mentioned last week, except for the
Voters
weekend.
made your graduated rate income tax plan a referendum on trust and repeal. Wondering how you gauge voters' level of trust with you now after you backed off the Fair Map Pledge, criticized Rowler for veteran tests, and then had some in LaSalle, made a tax deal with made a deal with Republicans on the tax breaks and then tried to revoke it out of the budget. How would you assess the voter trust level right now?
Look, we're restoring trust in the state of Illinois, in the government of Illinois, by passing budgets that are balanced, by making sure that we're addressing the needs of the people of the state, by fighting against the desire by the Republicans to essentially help their wealthy friends at the detriment of working families in the state. I think that's how you restore trust, and of course by passing ethics reforms. I think it's a good start what got passed. More is needed. There also are provisions, very important provisions, focused on ethics that are in a draft of the energy bill that we put forward, and we put forward our principles about ethics for that bill. So I think all of that builds toward a very positive view, I hope, by the people of Illinois. This gentleman here.
The Boyd bill as a modernization, of course, that didn't end up passing. The House and Senate passed different bills.
Yeah.
Are you still trying to get that passed? And a Boyd bill, in your opinion, would it mandate fingerprints?
No. There was a bill passed, actually, a FOID bill that we worked on. I mentioned it in my remarks, that Brendan Kelly from State Police worked on. This is a very important issue. As you know, when I came into office, there was a big backlog of issuance of FOID cards, and made more challenging, by the way, by the large number of people who purchased guns over the course of the last 2 years. And so we wanted to work on that with the General Assembly, and we did, and now there's a bill that's headed to my desk. I'm sorry?
There's no FOID bill, from my understanding, on the way to your desk. Each chamber passed different versions.
So it's my understanding at least that the Senate is going to be taking something up on this, so my expectation is that we'll be.
Governor Wall says, has a question, can you comment on the COVID numbers, lowest one-day increase since March 25th, positivity rate at 2.2%. Are we ready for phase 5?
We are, and in fact, it's scheduled for June 11th.